when it comes to matters of perspective, I always try to be fair. I always try to look at both sides. And the other day we did that video on how good it was, how easy we had it as mechanics back in the 70s and the 80s, working on cars from the 50s and the 60s. And after we did the video, we read through the comments, and you guys were like, it was like unanimous. Everybody agreed with me, you know. And I said to myself afterwards, I said, but there has to be a downside. I have to be fair about this. You know, what was the downside of the simplicity of those cars? And I really had to think about it, because, you know, it's hard to find a downside. But then it popped in my head. It's like, they were too easy to steal. That was one of the things. If you had a car, right, a muscle car, 1960s muscle car, there was a good chance that thing was going to get jacked at some point. Joyriding was really popular. Cars were so easy to steal back then that kids would steal a car just because it started to rain, and then they would leave it wherever wherever the destination was, or they would drive it till it ran out of gas. I mean, the upside is, when you had your car stolen in the 70s, unless it was going to a chop shop, there was a good chance you got it back, because it was stolen by a joyrider. But how easy was it to steal a 1960s car? So let's just say you're looking for a Dodge Dart, okay? And you're going to jack one. Movie theaters, you know, because they're going to be in there for a long time. Supermarkets, they're going to be in there for a long time. So you watch, you wait, you see a car pulls up, you see them go inside, you know you got a few minutes to work. How easy was it to steal one of these cars? You didn't need much. You needed a screwdriver. You needed an appropriately bent coat hanger. You needed the infamous hot wire to jump from the positive on the battery to the positive on the coil. And then you needed a coin. Jack the car. So yeah, it was that easy to steal one of these things. So, most cars, the charging system won't work when it's hot wired. So what a car thief would do is they'd drive it a mile or two, or get out of the area, and then they would either pop the ignition switch out and cross the wires, you know, to make it run like a regular car, or the guys who did this a lot would carry their own ignition cylinders with them with the key. So they would get out of sight and then just swap out the ignition cylinder and drive the car off with their own key. Ford, Chrysler, and AMC cars were really easy to start from under the hood because they all had their starter relays mounted under here. So, you know, on the Chrysler one, you use a coin. On the Ford ones and the AMCs that are usually mounted over here, you would just jump between the two terminals that would spin the motor. Start it up and there you go. General Motors cars were a little more difficult because the starter relay was built into the solenoid and that was under the car. But guys who stole those cars, they knew exactly how long a screwdriver and what angle to stick it in to get the motor to crank and go. Locking the hood, you know, that was a help, but guys were finding their way around it. A lot of guys back in the day would chain it, but then right away, as soon as that became popular, all of the car thieves had bolt cutters. Done, she's gone. There's very few ways you can keep an early car like this from being hot wired. A lot of guys in the day when they were going to the movies or they'd be leaving the car unattended for a while, they'd take the coil wire in with them or something along those lines. They'd take the rotor. But a lot of people put kill switches. And here's the thing with kill switches. 95% of them were wired into the ignition system or the key under the dash, and then they would hide the switch cleverly here or there, right? The problem with that is that they were interrupting the power to the coil. The hot wire supplies power to the coil, so those kill switches didn't do anything. The way you want to hook up a kill switch, if you're going to try to protect your own car, is to hook it to the negative on the coil and then ground it to the body. And there's something in the comments. You guys that have some creative solutions for kill switches, I know there's got to be 1,000 of them out there. Throw them in there. It could be an interesting list. So automakers didn't really get serious about theft deterrence and protection until the 1970s. These cars had the key in the dashboard, so there was no interference with the steering. 1970, they moved the key, and there was the steering wheel lock and the park lock. But again, it was easily defeated by people who were really determined to get your car. If somebody wants your car, you're not going to stop them. I've heard the most elaborate car theft stories. Probably the cops now. Actually, here's a story. When I was about 11, 12 years old, so it was like 1973, my neighbor next door, he was an auto crime detective in New York City, and they had busted a chop shop. So I see him in the morning, and he comes home, he worked nights, and he comes home, and he's like, I got something for you. And he pulls out a piece of paper, and it's got the autograph of let's just say 3 very well-known drag racers that were busted in that chop shop. This particular chop shop specialized in mopars, Hemi cars. So they would go out and steal, Roadrunners, GTXs, whatever, with Hemis, and then bring them to the chop shop, and this is what these guys ran their cars off of. It was a very common thing. So if somebody really wants, back to the theft deterrence. In the 70s, they started marketing this thing called the club. This was brilliant. This is great, right? It was a locking device. It was a telescoping lock, right, that went between your brake pedal and the steering wheel. And I remember them advertising how this thing was like, kryptonite, and you can't cut through it with anything. It's, this is like the toughest thing ever built, right? Car thieves used to laugh at stuff like that because, yeah, the club was made out of kryptonite, but the rim of the steering wheel was still plastic with a little ring of mild steel inside of it. A couple of seconds with a hacksaw and this thing was done. You drive off with it. Wasn't until the very later 70s and into the 1980s when cars really started to become hard to steal. Don't go stealing any cars. This is just for demonstration purposes only. So that's it. Like I said, if you have any cool ideas for kill switches and whatnot, throw them in the comments, and see you tomorrow.